Hey everyone, so my name is Randy Kim from the Bun Me Chronicles podcast, and it is a pleasure to invite a person that I have been observing the last couple of years in the podcast world, and her name is Joi Louviere. Um, to give you some background, Joi Louviere is currently the creator and the host of Work Stories, WERK Stories. And so to share more about who Joi is, Joy has a background in journalism and is currently a journalist, graduated from an HBCU, Hampton University. You have actually, after getting your master's in journalism from Georgetown University, you decided to globetrot
Yeah.
and also I feel like we have a lot of overlap just looking at this. And you have been working in nonprofit for a while, and then you realize that dealing with the what we call in the nonprofit world, the nonprofit industrial complex
Mhm.
created this environment that made it very difficult to continue. And I think when you started Work Stories, it was really out of a need to reflect and also to really challenged the work environment, specifically in America, and how it views and how it treats Black women and women of color, specifically in this environment. And so I think this is a very important topic to name, especially given what has happened with, the Jimmy Kimmel, but also with the many layoffs that have happened to Black women. I think which we really need to name that 300,000 plus Black women were forced out of the workforce. And I
Mhm.
think that is something that we are not talking about. We don't even talk about Joy Ann Reid, from MSNBC that got fired, or Karen from the Washington Post, who's a journalist. So I think that this is something that we do have to discuss because the Trump 2.0 administration is clearly escalating and finding ways to take away many civil liberties on a daily basis. And I really appreciate you joining me here. And I think the first question would be is, how are you navigating 2025 with only less than a few months left, if it's hard to believe?
Yeah, I feel like I have to take every day one day at a time. There's not a lot of like planning ahead because I don't know how I'm gonna feel. So even just like socially, what I want to do on the weekends or like spending time with people just feels like something I can't really plan because I can't predict what is going to happen in the news cycle that's going to completely derail my work week and affect my psyche. So many weekends I need the entire weekend to sleep, to
Hmm.
rest, to reflect, to watch stupid television to kind
Hmm.
of decompress from how serious every part of our life is. And so this year, I can't believe we're almost done with it. It's been really difficult, and in full transparency, it's been difficult for me to do another season of my podcast. I'm
Hmm.
really delayed with it. I'm pretty tight about pushing out my seasons, and
Hmm.
it's been almost a year
Hmm.
and since I wrapped my last season, and I've just had trouble starting again because it
Hmm.
just feels like more labor on top of what I'm already doing.
Hmm.
um, and it's just hard to have a hobby right now.
Yeah. And for context, you are a journalist and you were talking about just last night, well, this morning, there was a mass shooting at an ICE detention center in Houston, I believe. I know it's in
Dallas,
Texas, in
Dallas,
Dallas,
yes.
Texas,
Hmm.
and how you were sharing that I have to work overnight to
Hmm.
really get more detail so I can push it in for the next newsletter. And so I think this is like an example of like what journalists have to go through, especially when this is a field that is, this hurts my soul because I went into the journalism route coming out of college and seeing how it has declined like over the years in terms of support for it and also the need for quality journalism and for accountability because what we have seen with the current presidential administration, yeah, the freedom of the press and freedom of speech has been turned upside down,
Hmm.
and it is. it is creating a very hazardous situation, but it also creates an environment where like we don't have many folks to rely on for information. And we are also seeing fringe right-wing activists, infiltrating on podcasts, on social media, and a lot of disinformation that goes unchecked because Meta and now TikTok and some of these big platforms are controlling the narrative. So
Mhm.
I wonder, like having to navigate, your work as a journalist, like how do you find ways to to be able to do your work and also being able to stay in a situation where you feel a level of safety, which I don't know if that's even the right question.
Mhm. Well, I don't know. I feel like to do this work, you have to be really good at compartmentalizing.
Mhm.
Um, and there's levels where that gets unhealthy, but that's like the least of my worries. I'll deal with that in therapy in 10 years from now. Um, because you just have to, so you have to be able to focus and
Mhm.
move quickly. And one of the key parts of journalism is having good judgment. And so you can't do that when you're clouded by emotions and your own personal feelings and the consequences for you of what's happening outside. Um, I think one of the things I do every day is try to figure out what my audience needs to see. And what can I offer them that's different than what they're going to get from cable news, local stations, some of the other newsletters they're subscribed to. I think about all the ways they get information, TikTok,
Mhm.
Instagram. And so I'm trying to figure out how to get them news that they might not get in those spaces.
Mhm.
And even if it's, the same topic, how to frame it in a way or give them information that they're also not going to get in other places. So I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth, and
Mhm.
so my focus is really is talking to people about how what's happening at the state house in Texas and in the White House in DC is going to affect them.
Mhm.
So I have to bring everything home. But I also don't want to scare them and catastrophize things
Mhm.
and just flood them with negativity after
Mhm.
negativity. There has to be balance. So that's some of how I approach my job every day.
Mm, yeah, and also I was talking about the overlap that we have too, because I came in with a journalism background. I graduated college um, and I think it was 2007, so it was about actually a year before the economic recession, and which kind of goes with the familiar millennial narratives, like we were led to believe in this American dream, and that if you go to college, you're going to get a great job. And then the recession happened, and I saw the journalism field shrink considerably, like before my very eyes. I was getting a lot of interviews, and then one example was the Chicago Tribune, and I got interviewed with them 4 different times. And then all of a sudden, they had to pull that position out because it was filing for bankruptcy at
Mm-hmm.
the time. And then I realized that I had to start pivoting, like you. I was also a jet setter. I actually lived in South Korea, a place I had never been to, never really knew anything about. And I did
Mm-hmm.
for 3 years teaching English. And I know you had jet setted for 3.5 years, which
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such a great, I mean, there's a whole nother topic about traveling that I can get into, but like, I think it also, gave me an opportunity to step away from what is happening in America and also being able to recalibrate and what it is when I come back, how different I'm going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, which led me into nonprofit work. And, there's this feeling like, I want to help communities. Me being a son of refugees from Vietnam and Cambodia, um, I felt that it was important for me to give back and to be of service to folks in the communities and to strengthen my knowledge and my connection to community members, but also what I've seen with nonprofit work. And, as much as I love the people that I work with, and I still do, there's also a lot of emotional damage. There's also a lot of workplace trauma that gets involved. I mean, you're exposed to, especially if you're in the grassroots, the smaller nonprofits, like you're exposed to a lot of traumas. Like I remembered having to worry about the deportations in our community. I had to worry about, what policies are being enacted that are racist, that are clearly endangering marginalized groups of folks, and the little support that we get, and the fact that we sometimes martyr ourselves to will
Mhm.
ourselves to work, and then to the point where either we face health problems, people end up being, I hate to say this, but like being gone permanently. And also, or a lesser extent, just people turning away from the work altogether, which I have
Mhm.
seen. So I wonder about your journey and what you have observed in those years, like, being a journalist, having the jet set, working a nonprofit. How has it kind of like informed the way it has, um, the way it has really impacted your views about your employer um or being in the workplace environment?
Mhm. Yeah, I would compare the nonprofit experience for me to kind of how the disconnect in the US. So there is a group of people who feel like the US is the best country on the earth, right? We
Hmm.
have the best of everything. There's no greater place. I feel like nonprofits think that they're the best as well, that they are
Hmm.
doing this superhero work.
Hmm.
Um, and they're really, as some people say, doing the Lord's work, really, public servants
The
and reaching
savior
into the
level.
communities, right? It's a really white
Hmm.
savior
Yes, it
complex,
is. Sure it
reaching into
is.
these communities that no one cares about, and we're going to help you. We're going to give you the money. We're going to guide you.
Hmm.
Um, and it is the farthest thing from the truth,
Hmm.
just like it is that our country is the greatest country in the world. It is actually there is actually so much inner work we need to do in nonprofits, just like the inner work we need to do in our country before we go around talking about everybody and judging everybody else. And in my nonprofit experiences, I found that there wasn't enough focus on our staff and how we work together and how we treated each other and
Hmm.
policy and just general HR stuff and hours and money, and all of that stuff was so neglected
Hmm.
while we were literally doing things that were supposed to help other groups of people
Hmm.
get some of the things that we were lacking in our own jobs. Like
Hmm.
one nonprofit I worked for was supposed to help marginalized people, in this case it was youth, marginalized people get to college and get jobs.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then they hired those marginalized youth, who they grew up to be, and didn't pay them well and treated them like crap and
Ooh.
targeted them and said culturally insensitive things. And
Mm.
I mean, it
Mm.
was just a list. So it's
Mm.
like, so you're trying
Uh.
to save this group that then you then go harm. You want to pull
Hmm.
a me at 18 and then come back and slap me in the face and traumatize me. Like
Wow.
that's the experience I had. So it was kind
Mm.
of
Mm.
ironic. And then you do feel like a martyr. You do feel like, well, I have to suffer and sacrifice for the betterment of
Hmm.
everyone else, but that's actually not the case.
Hmm.
We could actually be helping communities, first of all, in the way that those communities want to be helped, not
Hmm.
just coming up with stuff, actually asking people what they need
Hmm.
and then providing it versus deciding. Um, and we can do that while we treat each other well as a staff, while we
Hmm.
implement, policies that help with work-life balance, while we pay
Hmm.
people fairly and give proper PTO and vacation time and bereavement
Hmm.
time and insurance. It's possible. Uh, I just haven't worked at a nonprofit that's figured it out.
Yeah, I have a lot to say on that because like the college access work that you have done, I'm gonna have to keep it minimal because I don't want to endanger, I don't want to like incriminate myself, but I will just say that I have seen that kind of behavior, and not and just in general, but also because I work in development in the
Mhm.
fundraising lane, so I work with board members, I worked with um, donors, small donors to high level donors, corporate
Mhm.
sponsors, and I know Voulez. is a nonprofit consultant. He does a lot of great work, who I recommend, and he has called out foundations, especially because the wealth that they have been given have been stolen
Mhm.
from Black communities, have been stolen, well, from indigenous communities. Let's be very clear here. But like that the money that they're giving, it should be reparations money.
Mhm.
It should be seen as that, instead of having like these high-end stakeholders who have no personal lived experience and should not be judging or telling a nonprofit what to do in terms of how they should spend that money. Um, and part of it is like not including staff salary. And I'm like, oh, how can you have a program, but you're not going to include staff salary? This is why we have a
Mhm.
heavy turnover. Um, so I think that there's a huge disconnect in the nonprofit experience. And, like as a person that is still trying to navigate my way through the nonprofit when I, enter back into it in some ways. I think it has also, in a way, made me very cautious and very skeptical, having healthy skepticism now about the intentions of folks and how the money's being used, but also like with community members that are receiving services, but also like in development, we need stories from community members. But one thing I've always said is, well, can we give them honorariums? Because I really feel like that's their story. We are benefiting from these grants.
Mhm.
And none of this would happen if we aren't getting stories. But we also have to empower that. Like I think that, I know I'm going into another deep dive about my critiques of nonprofit, but like when I think of employees not given enough PTO or enough bereavement time, which I've had to experience, with the loss of my brother earlier this year, I realized how much I had to step away and realize like this is not working for me. Um and this idea of like, with HR like throwing in like, oh, let's do a 1 hour yoga session, let's do a breathing session. And I'm just like, no, this
Yeah.
is not what we need. This
No
is not
way.
going to solve our problems. This is not going to solve like the deficit I have in paying my bills or anyone's
Mhm.
or for a family trying to pay their bills. Like we need more money and we need more resources and we need more time off.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a
And we
whole
just
nother
need to
dialogue.
be
Yeah.
treated well. Like there's so many people in leadership in nonprofits and in corporations that don't have leadership skills. Like that are
Mhm,
actually not qualified to lead. Maybe they're qualified to do a certain task and they know a lot about a subject, but being a leader is a completely different skill set than anything,
mhm,
that we could be doing in our professions, the actual work itself. It's a separate training that needs to happen, it's separate development. And people are getting into these positions who are absolutely not qualified and
mhm,
they are dangerous.
mhm.
And they're affecting entire industries,
Yeah.
especially nonprofit.
Yeah, I'm also like wondering about like your own take on I think like your take on what it means to be a Black woman from your own experience in 2025 in the workplace. What have you observed so far and how Black women and women of color are being treated and viewed as in the workplace these days?
Hmm. At this point, it just feels like some patterns are going to happen in the workplace. Like
Mhm,
everything feels timed out. Um, and I think so. I think there's some other Black women who would agree with me. Like at some point, you will be the pet. Usually in the beginning, you will
mhm,
be the star. People will love you. You come with the
mhm,
great ideas. You take initiative. You do all the things that are just in your natural skill set. And then those same things become an issue later.
mhm,
And so I think I just go into stuff thinking that it's a matter of time
mhm,
and that my goal with any job is just to get as much experience as I can get, have a variety of, good challenges for myself as a professional, and just be open to the fact that that will probably happen at some point. It might happen at different times, depending on where you work, but that shift will happen. And instead of being so emotional about it and sad and really depressed about it when it first happened to me, take it with a grain of salt, and I have
mhm,
to and understand and be very clear, this is the country I live in, and
mhm,
this is the
mhm,
work culture I'm a part of.
mhm,
And as long as I continue to work in, this money hungry society of the United States of America and function in this economy, that these are some of the things that are going to happen because we have not evolved past it.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
I'm hoping that one day before I leave this earth, I'll get
mhm,
to see the shifts,
mhm,
but I'm not holding my breath. And
mhm,
I think a lot of the work that I'm doing now is to just be a small, coin in the bucket for a bigger change that will happen long after I'm gone and our
mhm,
generation's gone.
mhm. That is very powerful, and to, name that. And I think of like this idea of work, of having to, especially when you're new to a company, especially if you're one of the few people of color or sexual identity or gender identities, and it feels like there's this tokenization, and there's this like exalting of like, oh my gosh, you have this great idea, we're having diversity,
Mhm.
whether they like to say it or not, usually it's framed in that spirit. But also, like, as I started to observe in other workplaces, there's always this mentality is like, well, we need new ideas. um we need you to see how you can kind of go beyond, and as kind of a way to, if you're going to get a promotion. And I have suckered myself into that. Like, I actually, worked on some of the DEI work for this one company, and I realized, like, you know what? No, I'm not getting paid extra for this.
Mhm.
This is actually outside of my job description. This is something that I had to think about, because I think this is a behavior that millennials and Gen Zs are picking up now. Because it's like, to do this extra labor, especially when it feels like we have to justify our belonging and justify our existence in a way. And I just think that it's so, um I could see how um debilitating that can feel,
Mhm.
and how, like, how you've had to um reshift the expectations and be like, hey, I know this is a capitalistic system that we're living in. We're all just trying to survive. It's a harm reduction approach that we all have to take and be
Mhm.
very mindful of. And I am very curious to know, like, especially with COVID that has happened. I mean, we were seeing like full remote work really disappear. And this was something that was started with the quiet quitting movement,
Mhm.
and now it's like it has reversed itself back. And I wonder, from your observations, why do you think that companies have decided to like pull back on the remote work, and also things that actually benefited employees?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's all about control,
Hmm.
as most things are in life, in my opinion. I think, they feel like they have a better sense of control over their employees when they can see them. When they can have them do these egregious tasks like drive in traffic for an hour and 15 minutes
Hmm.
on a rainy day or a snowy day to get into the office and then back. They can control if your kid's home from school, they can make sure you're not tending to your kid. They can make sure you're not washing clothes. They can make sure you're not taking a shower, God forbid, in the middle of the day.
Hmm.
It's just about, having as much control over people and then hoping, because it's not proven, there's no data behind it, but
Hmm.
hoping that they'll get more work out of folks. They'll get more productivity, even though nothing shows that they're going to get that.
Mm-mm,
Um,
mm-mm,
I think it's about, wanting to say, we're watching you and put that pressure on. And I think it kind of silences people from kind of the turning up, I'm going to say, that people have been doing the last few years of really
mm-mm,
voicing their opinions about leadership, creating relationships with their coworkers and people across teams to create
mm-mm,
bonding,
Mhm.
behind what's going on and then getting together,
Mhm.
coming together
Mhm.
and creating a plan of how you're going to tackle things. You silence a lot of that when you put people at desks where every time they get up to even go take a pee, you see them. Okay, so how can me and the coworker meet to talk about the issue at work and figure out a plan of how we're going to address it in the meeting, kind of, subtly, if everyone's watching us, right?
Mhm.
And so those are things that I think they feel like benefits them, like they're trying to take
Mhm.
those moments away, which is unfortunate because those are big connecting moments. Those are things
Mhm.
that just can't happen in person, and I think a lot of folks will realize like there was a lot of mobilization of employees that happened remotely that just wasn't possible in the office environment. So yeah, I think that's definitely one of the reasons. And I don't know, it feels like they just want people to be miserable, and
Mhm.
they think that misery will benefit them,
Mhm.
and make them more money and be able to get more out of people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also like thinking another sinister uh theory I have in mind is also like like these companies have to pay leases and rents, and
Hmm.
I think that there's something to that nature. I'm not an expert. I'm not an economic expert first and foremost, but also like the restaurant cities to the government, like there are a lot of businesses that rely um on at site employees, to go to a Chipotle um in downtown Chicago, or or being able to you know have more face-to-face connections, like as a way to create more ideas, as if it can't be done online. So I think that there is
Hmm.
this weird way of how capitalism really reins that in. It's like,
Hmm.
no, it gives you too much freedom, but it also means um, we can't watch you, as you have mentioned, but it also means that other people around it can't make money.
Hmm.
So it's like
Yeah.
it's to our detriment in a way, and that's something I think about, like who it actually affects, you know, um, and also affects our climate too, because people have to drive to get to
Hmm.
work, or take the buses,
Yeah.
and we've also seen that our climate kind of improved a little bit during the
Yeah.
first lockdown, and it's like, okay, now we're actually seeing how it could work out, but no, we're back to where we were, and I would say like something that really makes me wonder about the workplace these days, especially among our generation, is like how we view HR.
Hmm.
And I kind of alluded to, like, you see these 1 hour yoga sessions that they offer, or these coupons to like a wellness, or like this 5 free sessions from BetterHelp. But like, what is it about HR that they're not connecting, or these company leaders are not understanding? Because this is not, I don't think it's really showing that it's actually improving the quality of employees.
Hmm. Yeah, I have interviewed so many HR professionals that I think they've always had differing opinions about the role of HR and what HR is supposed to be. You'll have people who say it's supposed to protect the company. Other people will say we are there for the employees and the company is secondary.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I think it just depends on where you work and the culture that's already been established there with leadership. But there is not like a good checks and balances, and I think
Mhm.
that's why there's back and forth on that. There should be somebody there to protect the company. I think that's what legal's for. That sounds like a good reason to have legal or like some other entity. But like who's there to make sure that your employees are happy and that they're getting what they need to produce
Mhm.
the work you want to get the money you want? I think both of those things can exist and make sense. If I was a business owner, I'd want to figure out how to be protected too. And as an employee, I want somebody on my team. And so I think some of those efforts are just to say that they did something. It's just to cross something off a list. It's not
Mhm.
actually about listening to what your employees are
Mhm.
telling you they need. And if you create safe spaces for them to give you that feedback, not surveys that you say are anonymous that are not, and then you get on an all hands call and are extremely aggressive about the responses to said surveys.
Mm-hmm.
That's like not
Mm-hmm.
feeling safe. That's not the way to do it. But, creating a system where your HR leaders are people you feel like comfortable with. I just need to go to you. I need to talk to you about what's happening. And they can give you perspective too. Because, sometimes things that happen in the workplace are very emotional and you
Mm-hmm.
do have to like think of both sides of things. And just like we call a friend after work or a parent or, your romantic partner to kind of get perspective, you know, HR can be that perspective of like, I totally see what you're saying. I do know that this is happening over here. What about this? Like, and create a solution with you that works and get your feedback on what feels good to you and what you think will work to rectify a problem. I think that can happen. I just
Mm-hmm.
think it requires a lot more care for employees than currently exists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's also ironic. It's like when someone is just the lowly employees, everyone cares about the people, right? Unionize, power to the employee. Everyone needs vacation time, fair treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And then something about once you rise to a certain level,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you forget everything, like all your morals and values. Like
Mm-hmm.
for so many leaders and execs just like fall off. And now it's
Yeah.
like, whatever, they just should do their job. And it has that attitude. It
Mm-hmm.
almost reminds
Mm-hmm.
me how folks say there are no good billionaires. You just
Mm-hmm.
can't be truly good with that amount of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of scares me, right? Because millennials are probably the last generation, and I will not even say all millennials because half of us have decided we don't want leadership roles. But
Mm-hmm.
we're
Mm-hmm.
like definitely the last generation that is going to be like, I'm trying to climb the ladder um, and want those big positions, but do we have to sacrifice who we are? Do we have to sacrifice our
Mm-hmm.
morals and values to do
Mm-hmm.
that? And it does make you rethink, how high do you want to go? And
Mm-hmm.
if you
Mm-hmm.
are just trying to go high for the money, what else could you be doing to generate the money you want for life that doesn't require you to be a corporate exec and become heartless?
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think that's a conversation a lot of millennials are having. I think Gen X it's over. They
Mm-hmm.
are already leading, and I think it's too far gone. But I think for millennials, a lot of us have time to consider what that looks like and what we're willing to give up,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because every position is not, you have to trade in something.
Mm-hmm.
When you are junior, you're friends with everybody. You know what's going on. You're included in the side conversations. You get camaraderie at work and a community.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to give that up the higher you go.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes,
Yeah.
and people will tell you that's something they miss and they mourn as they move up the ladder. But
Mm-hmm.
then, of course, when you're junior, you also don't have a say. You don't get listened
Mm-hmm.
to. You get a horrible salary. You're the first to go in a layoff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like it's a trade-off. Like, what am I willing to sell for this check? What am I willing to give up of myself? And
Mm-hmm.
that requires all of us to do some really deep work and know
Mm-hmm.
ourselves 100% before we can make any career moves.
Mm. That really hits very close to home too, because that's something that, you know, but millennials also being the most educated generation so far, we've also, I can't remember where I read this, but we are the most compassionate, empathetic
Mm-hmm.
generation in a way, and I see that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we struggle with giving guidance
Mm-hmm.
to because the guidance that we were given does not hold true
Doesn't
today.
work. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of why we feel very jaded and rightfully jaded and that we have to like redefine our expectations
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's why we struggle to give guidance to the Gen Z folks,
Mm-hmm.
and why it feels very challenging because it's like I don't know if I really want to lead. And sometimes I ask myself that too, because I want to be seen as a person who's authentic, who's not going to be part of the harm. Like if
Mm-hmm.
I have to be a director that actually is going to have to lay off 15 of my staff, you know, as a person who's gone through layoffs myself and watching other people lose their jobs and seeing what it has done to them, it's hard for me to have that kind of a conversation and be
Mm-hmm.
like, we have to let you go. And we may not have enough severance for you, which, I wish I have a magic wand and say you deserve a year of severance.
Hmm.
You deserve like several months of health insurance
Hmm.
at the very least. So I think that there's a lot of trepidation with taking on leadership because it does require you to have to give up something, but at the same time, you also unlock more privileges that are more exclusive. And
Hmm.
for some people, it is alluring. And
Yeah.
for others, it's like I can't abandon the people that were rooting for me. Like I remember my brother, he worked at this one company and he had to actually cut his staff and he didn't find out until literally like an hour or two before that. And they just gave him names. And some of the people he had to lay off were people that actually, supported him
Hmm.
on his rise. And it was devastating to him. He told me he
Yeah.
wanted to quit that week because um of how he felt like a villain. Even though that was
Hmm.
not his fault, but
Yeah.
that was what he had to deal with. And it did get him away from the leadership um trajectory for a while because of that. And
Hmm.
I think that that's something that we have to confront, but also among, if you're a person of color, and what does that mean? Because
Hmm.
we aren't always given guidance. Like when I was in the journalism field, I worked at a sports TV network,
Hmm.
and as an intern at the time, the marketing department is completely white.
Hmm.
And I think that at the time in my thinking, I was like, if I work hard, um, if I can just enter in, then I can enter into that field. I feel like I can really, stand out. But as I was going to these places, like into the journalism field, like into the different publications and different places, and it was a very white landscape that I had to navigate, and it felt disheartening, to
Hmm.
see that. And it also made me wonder, like, who can I actually turn to as a mentor that actually understands what it's like to be a queer Asian man,
Hmm.
let alone if you are of any of intersecting identities, like who do you turn to? And I think that is also something that we really struggle with, but we also at the same time we feel very compassionate about because
Hmm.
we've all been through, the rejections, the surprises, the bad surprises that have happened to us. So I'm curious about some of your own experiences of like, microaggressions or what ways that you were forced to self-preserve,
Hmm.
to not fall into this horrible stereotype that, that people have, especially with leaders, like, you can't, if you speak out too much, then you're seen as poison or you're seen as toxic or like certain behaviors that you have to like code switch on.
Hmm. Well, I will say at 36, I feel like I've just figured it out. Lots of error. And I'm not even gonna say error because I don't think what I was doing was wrong, but it definitely
Mhm,
wasn't advantageous for me.
mhm,
And so I think I've realized I'm a person that is always gonna speak up.
mhm,
And I'm now comfortable with that and I've accepted that about
mhm,
myself. I'm never going to be the quiet one. There does have to be people who are quieter, who play the game in that way. I'm just not that person.
mhm,
It's fine. So
mhm,
I respect that person because we need, like you said, we need people to be able to be those leaders. And oftentimes getting those positions are the people who just kind of stay quiet. They mind their business, they do just what they need to do to get by. And that is a strategy that works. And we want to see ourselves in those higher positions. Um, and sometimes being yourself doesn't is hard to land in those, like,
mhm. Oh
and
yeah.
I appreciate that person who has figured that out and that's what feels right to them, and that's like true to their personality. It's just not true to mine. So after I've realized I'm always going to be a person to speak up, and I've charted it back to my upbringing, the different experiences I had really young in life and as a young person, teenager, whatever, has all primed me for being outspoken.
Hmm.
And I rather have nothing
Hmm.
than not be true to myself and not do right by my community. I'd rather
Mhm.
have nothing. And
Mhm.
that's like and I have had nothing
Mhm.
at times because of that. And so that's just a rule that I've made for myself,
Mhm.
one. So
Mhm.
knowing that. And then two, it's like, okay, so then the next step is how in your next experiences do you navigate being who you now have determined you are, but you want to have a job. You want
Mhm.
to be liked
Mhm.
at your job. You want to get promoted. You want to make more money, all of these things. And so I figure there's a time to push and there's a time to pull. And so I pay a lot of attention in my workplaces now of when I feel like I can push more and pushing is sometimes just asking questions.
Mhm.
That's the
Yeah.
push. It's really not
Mhm.
that deep, but like it's just why? But why? Kind of like being a
Mhm.
2-year-old. But
Mhm.
why? But why do we have to do that? But didn't you just
Mhm.
say this? It's like holding people accountable. And so I just try to figure out, I assess like who can I remotely
Mhm.
trust in the first months
Mhm.
of a job? And I say remotely because you can't fully trust anyone. At the end of
Mhm.
the day, everyone's going to do what they need to do for themselves in the workplace.
Mhm.
So you really have no friends in the workplace until you leave. And the
Mhm.
people who are your friends after you leave are actually your friends, but you don't
Yeah.
know it yet. You don't know
Yeah.
what people will
Oh, yeah.
do. So I try to figure out who can I remotely trust, and then if I do need to vent about things or get advice or whatever, I go to those people. If it has to be people in the workplace, because sometimes you just need to call friends and family.
Mhm.
Um, and then I gauge a situation. I pay close attention to how folks react when certain subjects are brought up, or there are people pushing, or whatever. And I just watch everyone, and I
Mhm.
decide when I want to do my thing
Mhm.
and when I think it will work and it's worth it, right? It has
Mhm.
to be worth it. You have to pick and choose your battles. Not everything
Mhm.
is worth putting up a fight about. So when to do it and when to say, not today. Or it feels like a weird situation. Or I feel like something's brewing that I don't
Mhm.
fully know about, but I don't like the feeling I'm getting. So I'm
Mhm.
trusting my
Mhm.
instincts. And so years of dealing with lots of different people in the workplace, you should be building your instincts and focusing in on that, and then be listening to your gut when it says, this is not the thing to push, or this is the time to go in right now. You have to hold somebody accountable. You
Mhm.
have to say no. You have to, say, this is not my job or whatever.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that's kind of the stage I'm in now. I don't think I've perfected it, but I think I have figured out that you know, professional life is a push and pull.
Mhm.
And the people who make it out, having all of those great accolades in the end, and the generational wealth we all want, and the
Mhm.
lake house or whatever your goals are with your
Mhm.
job, are the people who I think have figured that out.
Mhm. I don't know if you ever watch on TikTok the real Veronica. I kind
Mm-mm.
of go into the rabbit hole. It's like an animation sketch hosted by Veronica, and she gives examples of clapbacks, to her
Mm-mm.
employer, and then trust me, some of those I've actually put to practice. Where she gets
Oh,
very
I know who you're talking
yes.
about. Wait, it just clicked. I know exactly who you're talking about. She's funny.
Yes, she's
Yeah.
hilarious, and I'm just
Hmm.
like, you know what? This is the energy I want to bring.
Hmm.
I know that it's gonna come at risk, a
Yeah.
lot of risk here, but I'm also kind of like I'm already in my 40s. Like I don't like I've been through it, and I feel like when I see younger coworkers of mine, and sometimes I feel like I will just pop off, and
Hmm.
not at them, but more like pop off in a way where like, look, I think this idea is ridiculous.
Hmm.
And sometimes I do it to actually test people's reactions. And I will
Hmm.
do that, because I'm like, you know what? I may not be fully authentic, but I like to be very curious. And I'm
Hmm.
like, and I would like to observe people's behaviors, like their body language when there's like a in-person staff meeting, or
Hmm.
like what questions are being asked, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of reading the posts of this, and that kind of informs me of the conversations. But yeah, sometimes I do make friends on the spot because I do have a big mouth, and
Hmm.
I get very reactionary. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have a poker face. I mean, that doesn't work well in situations where I really need to be more subtle. But
Hmm.
but I think that What I also am very curious about is what does trust, what does trusted leadership look like to you?
Hmm. I think it's seeing like who's genuinely interested in the humans that they're managing.
Hmm.
Like, are they interested in your development outside of the company? If you've worked with someone for 4 years and they've never asked you about your career goals, that's a big sign. They probably don't care about, your identity outside of them and that company. So I look for, the conversations that I have. There's been managers I've had who have never ever brought up anything personal about themselves, never asked me about myself. They don't exhibit curiosity. And there's been, I was going to say managers, but really a manager that I've had who I feel like has really invested in me and, wants the best for me, even if it's not, to their benefit.
Hmm.
And I think I kind of look for that. And it's just like what the conversations are. Most people end up having calls with their manager, I don't know, every week, every other week, whatever the cadence is. And so those are times I kind of get to know the person who is supposed to be my representative. Um, and I think I make very clear indirectly that just as much as I'm working for them, they're working for me.
Hmm.
So you are my representative. You are supposed to carry my needs and concerns to a higher platform and address them and then come back to me with information, right? Like I'm trusting you
Hmm.
to represent me and so is this team and whoever. And so I think I figured out ways to show that being my value in the workplace and that's the
Hmm.
relationship I've wanted. And then I just kind of see what the person does. How do they exhibit that? When we have calls, do I hear things that I've talked to you privately about from other places? Um, that's something pretty simple. It's like,
Hmm.
are you repeating things in our private phone calls? Because that's a sign. That could also be a sign that that's not somebody you can trust. I think trust in leadership, like when we're talking about head of HR, CEOs, kind of those really big roles,
Hmm.
um, really is about transparency. I mean, it's the best they can do is to be transparent. So let's say something is happening in the company that they know is going to upset people, whether it's layoffs,
Hmm.
whether it's deletion of a benefit everyone loved, whether it's coming back into the workplace when they've been
Hmm.
remote, whatever it is. I think it just goes a long way to get on a call and be like, listen, I know this is not what you guys want. I know you're scared right
Hmm.
now, or you're unhappy, or this is putting a kink in your life. And let me tell you as much as I can about why this is happening, my personal perspective on it, because just because it's my personal perspective doesn't mean that I can implement that depending on what role they're in,
Hmm.
and just like allow people to talk about their feelings around what's happening. I think that goes a long way. I often see a lot of leaders are very obsessed with themselves.
Hmm.
And so they spend a lot of time talking about like the impacts on them and like I feel this way and like I've just been I me. And I think really letting your staff talk,
Hmm.
and that comes with not getting mad, not getting
Hmm.
defensive,
Hmm.
not trying to pursue action against them after the meeting's over, really letting them say, voice their concerns and giving
Hmm.
an open forum and then taking notes, like write it down, like keep things in mind and then be able to follow up with them and be like, hey, so and so mentioned last week that they were worried about this in regards to the layoffs, and I went back and got the information and just wanted to tell you that you don't have to worry about that and this is why. Just like
Hmm.
actually going and having a back and forth, I think creates trust, and then being as transparent as you can as the leader to say, this is why this has to happen, even
Hmm.
though we hate that it's happening.
Yeah, I think that really holds true because I think, trusted leadership is about centering the needs and concerns of your employees and
Mm-hmm.
validating them too, but also being honest about what the next steps are too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also very important
Following
because
up. Yeah.
because I think if you're talking about yourself, like, well, I feel this way and I'm worried, then you're centering yourself in this and you're
Mm-hmm.
not really actually understanding what it is from their perspective. And these are the folks that actually keep the lights going on, for
Mm-hmm.
for this company and also allow leadership to gain the benefits because of the people that are on the frontline staff.
Mm,
I wonder about like when you're like searching for jobs, because I know right now the job search is wildly a shootout right now, a cowboy. It's like the Wild Wild West basically, and it's like it's like how do you like find ways to identify um strong alignments with a prospective employer during an interview? Like, what
mm,
comes to your mind when you're sitting down and they're looking at your resume and asking questions? And what goes through your mind? And what do you feel like are the red flags or the green flags that, like, oh,
mm.
okay, well, I feel like this is a person that I feel like I could trust?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like today, I feel like the job market has changed so much just in the last few months. So I'm not sure what my strategy would be today. But in
Mhm,
the past, like it has been being, especially, and it depends on what angle you're going into getting the job. If you just need employment, like if you are unemployed and you just
mhm,
need a job, you need to pay your bills, you need to survive,
mhm,
that is going to be a completely different way you approach something than if you are
mhm,
interviewing with a job. Um, and with a purpose to like grow your career versus
mhm,
just pay rent. So first of all, those are two different things. So I'm
mhm,
gonna speak to if you are just trying to grow your career and you are not desperate for a job.
mhm,
Because I think if you're
mhm,
desperate for a job, you should do whatever you need to get the job.
mhm.
I always suggest people eat and have housing over anything
Yes, yes.
else. So yeah, so if you are just, moving on to see what options are out there and see like the next best fit for you, I would just say things in the interview that makes it very clear who I am. So that there is no, they say interviews are conversations between two liars, but I do think some honesty when you're not in a high stakes situation is great. And I think it is like so upfront and cool of you to do. And I think the interviewer appreciates it too. And if like, so you could say, um, I'm a person who really values work-life balance.
Mhm,
And you don't have to go into the details because you shouldn't reveal too much. You shouldn't reveal if you're a parent or if you're caring for an elder or some of those other things to
mhm,
allow people to discriminate against you. But you can say enough to talk about how I do my best work when I
mhm,
have enough personal time.
mhm,
When I get to really enjoy my evenings and weekends, I am the best at work. I come up with better ideas. I'm present in
mhm,
calls. I show up for my team. I'm creative, whatever, relating to your job. You can say things that show that this is valuable to you.
mhm,
So if they already know that they're working people like dogs, they already know not to hire you. So you get to go ahead and create a situation where that door isn't even open for you anymore because you would be unhappy there anyway. So I
mhm,
think this is, yeah, I know this is hard because the
mhm,
goal is always to get a job. And I think this is how our society has framed it. It's all about saying the right thing to get the job. But I think we
mhm,
have to stop thinking like that. And particularly as folks of color who live in a different reality than white folks
mhm,
around employment and resource, and then let add other layers to it, right? If you're first gen, if you support your family, whatever. um, I think when we do have the privilege of choosing the job versus begging for it, we
mhm,
should take it. And I think we should be really clear about what we want from our next employers, and we should be talking about those things in the interview. You value this. You're looking for because you're interviewing them.
mhm,
Like I'm over here and I'm going to dedicate 50 hours a week to you. This is a contractual agreement and I'm supposed to be getting just as much as you're getting. So if I say I value my private time and my weekends or whatever, and you are telling me that I'm going to have to work, you know, 60-hour Monday through Friday and some weekends, that is going to just show we are not in alignment. Um, if you are talking about some views on things, oftentimes it can get a little political, right? And you're kind
mhm,
of sensing, oh, we don't have the same politics, and I might encounter some issues here that are just not in alignment with me. There you go, done, interview done. You get
mhm,
to choose not to continue with the interview. They get to have a sense that you wouldn't be a great fit for what
mhm,
they're offering. I think we need to be more selective about jobs.
Mm-hmm.
We need to not put ourselves in situations to cause trauma. And I know that is a privileged thinking, but those of us who do have more privileges, particularly than the people before us, than the people around us, need to utilize them when we can,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've been in times where I've been desperate for a job and I have not had the privilege of doing that. I'll take whatever. What
Mm-hmm.
am I doing? I don't care if the role shifts. I need the check.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had times where I'm like, I am looking for a healthier environment for myself. So I'm super choosy right now. And I'm okay with telling you that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these are very good approaches and a good way of framing the conversation too, especially if you're in a position of trying to elevate yourself when, you don't have as many stakes in that moment
Hmm.
versus like you really do need a job. I'm just gonna have to do what I can. But also a reminder that jobs are temporary too. And
Hmm.
that's usually in the back of my mind. Like
Yeah.
I'm not bound for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
I'm not like, handcuffed to it for an eternity. So I think that's also a thing that I always remind myself, but I also tell folks too, like, you know what, it's just a step to where you need to do to
Yep.
get to where you hope to be in the overall long run too. So
Hmm.
I think that's something I try to remind myself of. And like when we're seeing the DEI guardrails come off, especially with this year, like what do you think that impact is going to really have in the workplace for people who are already, you know, trying to navigate this specifically with people of color?
It's the wild, wild west out here now.
Mhm.
Like, I'm actually like constantly concerned with how far this is going to go because we're only in the beginnings of it. We haven't even really seen the impacts. I mean,
Mhm.
we're in an administration that has only ruled for 9 months and it has felt like 9 years. It is
Mhm.
insane the things that have changed so quickly and the groups that have been affected. And of course, the most vulnerable groups are being screwed the most, right?
Mhm.
So I don't even know where we're headed with it. I think it's I want to say something positive here, but I
Mhm.
really think it's only going to get worse. And it is going to require then on the employee for us to move differently in the workplace. So some
Mhm.
of the things we talked about 3 years ago around professional whatever is not going to apply in
Mhm.
2026. Like
Right.
this is not the land we're living in anymore.
Mhm.
And so we're going to have to adjust and we're going to have to adjust quickly and then something else will shift and we'll have to adjust then. So I think it's really important for like the modern worker to
Mhm.
understand that you have to stay on your toes. Like this is a
Mhm.
basketball game. You need to be ready
Mhm.
to you should be on offense, defense, sit the bench,
Mhm.
whatever, and be ready to pivot because there's not going to be a lot of time for full podcast seasons and books and
Mhm.
documentaries to roll out to teach you what to do. Because by the time we can even give you the episode, the whole situation has changed.
Mhm.
So people have to really pay attention to what is happening in their workplace. They have to figure out what they're willing to accept and not accept, and also be aware of like it's going to feel like we are in some of the times our parents talk about the some of the
Mhm.
stories your parents have about what it was like working in whatever industry in 1980 this or 1970 this. It's going to feel like some of that is coming back.
Mhm.
Um, and so this is also a good time to talk to our elders. Like,
Yeah.
how did they navigate it? And at those times, it was more normal. They didn't know what we know now. They didn't have 2020. We know
Mhm.
what 2020 and 2021 felt like, and how high we got in terms of representation and accountability. And like, we had a peak.
Mhm.
We did. I mean, was it
Mhm.
honest or not? That's up for debate. I say
Mhm.
no. Say it wasn't
Mhm.
authentic, but we still had it, and those systems were in place, and people were being, you know, winning lawsuits when they were discriminated. Like it was just like a little golden moment,
Mhm.
and so we do know what it's like. So it's going to be harder for us, but I do think we can get advice from some
Mhm.
of our elders about how they navigated just straight up racist, homophobic, whatever environments. Like they're going to be able to maybe instill some gems. And it's
Mhm.
about coping, right? Like we hope this is not a long-term situation. And I'm going to move forward like it's not. And I'm just going to say, I just need to get through whatever. I just need to
Mhm.
get through the year, get through the era, whatever, and hope that there will be another day that feels like 2021 felt.
Mhm.
2020, whatever time you want to reference. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think,
Yeah.
asking folks who have been through it for advice is like
Mm.
is what we need to be doing right now.
Yeah. And I know as we're starting to wrap up, like, are there things that you're looking to do for the rest of this year and moving into 2026 that you're, whether it's like, for self-care purposes or professionally or with work stories, like what are you looking to do in the next couple of months?
There was some like an article that came out and then some follow-up reporting that specifically for Black women,
Mm-hmm.
the professional life is the hardest. And the data that was used was like, Black women have some of the hardest treatment in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And we are women, right? So we're getting paid less, but then we're Black, so we're getting paid less, despite being the most educated group of people, period.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, and we are also single for so much longer. So a Black
Mm-hmm.
woman stays single and unmarried, particularly one that's professional, particularly one that's college educated, much longer than any other group of people.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't even have the support of a partner's salary or just partnership a lot of the times to be able to get through some of these really difficult challenges that are placed in front of us. And so I and one of the reasons I would assume that we are single for longer is because we're so focused on that professional element, that drive, that like this is our number one focus, and to have to deal with all of the microaggressions and things that come your way, you
Mm-hmm.
have to be focused. It doesn't feel like, personally, it doesn't feel like I have a lot of time to have hobbies, to focus
Mm-hmm.
on a romantic relationship, to even travel at this point like I used to um, worry about my health, to run errand, anything
Mm-hmm.
that benefits other parts of my life. Those feel like they're on the back burner, and my career is the number one thing I have to think about
Mm-hmm.
because I have to survive and there's no one to back me up. And so that's the mindset a lot of people get into, and it's not good because then we neglect all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we lose the job, the 300,000 women, Black women who have lost their
Mm-hmm.
jobs, don't have the job, and that certification anymore doesn't mean anything. And you have all these degrees and you can't even pay your bills, or, you're being so mistreated in the workplace. You are developing massive anxiety and now you're on depression meds. I hear it all the time. Some people have even like been in situations where, they've had heart attacks,
Yeah.
miscarriages.
Mm-hmm.
The cortisol level for Black women is higher than anything else charted. So we keep weight on longer. We're more likely to have all these different diseases and die early. I mean, you think about the I think she was a leader. I think it's like a VP at a college a few
Mm-hmm.
years ago,
Yes. Yes, I do
and
remember.
she was
Mm-hmm.
fighting with the administration, and then she just died of like a heart attack or something. And then like the next day, they were like replace her. Like, all of that stuff happens. That's a common story because and it's so sad. Like we think we need to zoom in, and society has shown us like we have to be all about our careers, but then we have like nothing else to show for it. We have no other elements of life. So I'm saying all this to
Mm-hmm.
say I don't want to die of a heart attack in my
Mm-hmm.
job. And on my tombstone says she was really good at spreadsheets. I
Jeez.
want to have
Wow.
a life. Like I want to live and I want to
Yeah.
figure out how to like
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the things my city has to offer, travel, keep my body healthy, develop meaningful relationships, and do whatever else I come up with. Maybe I want to take an adult ballet class, whatever. Like have hobbies and have fun and have my life mean something more than my title. And that's what I'm really going to be focusing on this year is like I think Maxine Waters out of Cali says reclaiming my time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Absolutely.
have spent my whole life, and when you really think back, especially Black and brown parents, right, instill like you're
Mm-hmm.
going to college. You're going to college
Mm-hmm.
at like 6 years old. There's
Mm-hmm.
pressures. You're going to be a doctor, and you're like, what? I got to be a doc. I got to be an engineer. I got to be all these things, right? These things are placed over you,
Mm-hmm.
over your life by the ancestors. And
Yes.
it's a lot of pressure to grow up knowing that you're expected to be the best because
Mm-hmm.
you have to represent everybody that came before you and make all of
Mm-hmm.
those sacrifices worth it. And I love the way cultures of color instill greatness into their children, and it we got to have some boundary. We have to be okay with being
Mm.
average some years, never making it to the top of the ladder. I never went to law school, much to many people's heartbreak, right? Like
Same here.
we
I
right,
disappointed
like
my disappointed my
disappointed.
dad. My
We
dad
have
was
to be okay with like having years where it's just not about that, or maybe just turning out to be average. I'd
Mhm.
rather be
Yeah.
average and happy though. And I'm gonna reclaim my time. I'm gonna reclaim like all of the other things I was
Mhm.
put on this earth to do besides be a workhorse. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on this year. And hopefully that will balance all of the nastiness happening outside,
Mhm.
all of the things I have to report about, the craziness in my state of Texas. Like, I've got to create balance. And I think if I can do that, I will be able to handle what is to come a lot better.
Yeah, and I think those are very powerful words of wisdom here because I know like when I look at when I read about Trisha Hersey from the Nap Ministry and when she talks about how
Mm-hmm.
rest is resistance and it's a way to counter against the white supremacist engine or capitalism that runs on the engine of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
And actually like I remembered another when I used to work for a foundation like many years ago, like one of our partners basically in a meeting, she basically said, you know what? Perfection the is a tool of white supremacy, and that has
Mm-hmm.
stayed with me because I think about productivity, this
Mm-hmm.
idea of having to perfect ourselves to such an extreme that it breaks us down, like for us to get accepted, to actually get the crumbs,
Mm-hmm.
and or just for survival. Like if we don't get
Mm-hmm.
this perfected right, we're gonna get punished.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that a lot too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do I undo perfectionism to just
Mm-hmm.
being more idealistic? What's realistic for me in this
Realistic.
moment rather than just trying to martyr myself or will
Mm-hmm.
myself to their benefits? Like, the perfect attendance awards that I used to get back in the day, it also conditioned me to be present at work all the time. And I
Mm-hmm.
used to be weird about taking sick time. Now it's like, no, I'm taking my sick time. I need to stay healthy. I had lost, my brother earlier this year. He was like 39 and to see him try to will himself because he felt like he had something to prove constantly.
Mm-hmm.
It created a very difficult situation for him in the way he was sustaining himself. And I used to tell him like Andy, you can't like tie down um your job to your identity,
Mm-hmm.
like
It's
you
so
can't.
hard.
You have to like break out of that cycle. I mean, that was something my parents unfortunately had to deal with because, they came in as refugees, from my mom, like she told me 3 days later, her and her family were like out in the factories working,
Mm-hmm.
realizing that they had just went through the camps, realizing that they had just crossed oceans and survived state-sponsored violence. And so it's something that I'm trying to undo, for myself. And I think for so many people, especially in the Black communities where, there's slavery, hundreds of years of slavery to segregation and
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of violence and how that has conditioned people to have to survive, to work to survive at
Mm-hmm.
their own detriments, and
Mm-hmm.
losing people at early ages, and I think that's something that I think is very important to, name that. So I really appreciate you going into this dive with me on, talking about what the workplace could look like, but also how do we ground ourselves to
Mm-hmm.
keep going, but also hopefully find joy and abundance along the way, that keeps us going and keeps us innovating.
Yeah. And like I said, how our elders have things to teach us, obviously they raised us. We have that
Mm.
element to teach them. We get to
Yes.
teach them what having fun looks like, enjoying
Yes.
yourself, having no schedule, waking up late, right?
Yep.
After being told that we were being lazy for sleeping in because the
Hmm.
house
Yep.
needs cleaning,
Yep.
like we get to then give that back as a gift. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I just hope that everyone gets to, reclaim their time and their joy.
Hmm.
Ironically, me being Joy, right? Maybe it
Yeah.
was a foreshadowing that I should be an arbiter of that, right? I should
Yeah.
help people be able to welcome that in their lives. So I'm doing
Yeah.
my best.
Yeah, and all the best to you, and I wish you nothing but joy and abundance. And I hope that people could tune into the work stories. I know that you haven't put out an episode for the past year, but I feel like it's still very relevant to hear these stories. But also, are you also doing any other thing that people can follow you on and or reach out to you with?
Yeah, like people can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Joi Louviere that exists in the world. So wherever you see me, it's me. So definitely can reach out to me there. And I am working on a new season. So season 8 of Work Stories will be out maybe about time this is out or close to it. It definitely will be October. So I'll be telling new stories and I'm interested in talking to different people and seeing what stories folks want, right? Like we are in a weird time.
Mhm.
And so sometimes you can't just put out the same content you did for 7 seasons that
Right.
worked. We're not in those seasons anymore. So
Mhm.
I want to hear, what is plaguing people right now, what type of advice they need, and what type of people they want to hear
Mhm.
from, and talk to people with intersectional, more intersectional identities, right? There are so many types of people and experiences that I haven't been able to cover, industries
Mhm.
and trajectories, and so I hope to do that this season.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And stay tuned. All right. Thank you so much,
Yay.
Joy. Have a good one.
You too.